No. The little girl stood in front of the tall sergeant. She knew her dad was right behind her. She could feel his trembling hand on her shoulder. It was all the confidence booster she needed. I have brought tea and coffee. I thought you might be cold. I don't have any sugar. The grocery store is gone. The Russian soldiers stared in disbelief. They were cold, they hadn't any supplies in the last 3 days, nor orders. They just stood still. It was the sergeant who spoke first. That is kind of you, young lady, but we are the enemy. If you turn around and go about 3 blocks back, you should find your own soldiers who would love tea and coffee. But aren't you cold? Yes. Young lady, we are. Well, then, it is settled. Here. Tea in the blue pot, coffee in the red one. 3 are so many of you, you might have to take small sips. The sergeant tried one more time, his eyes only on the little girl. But we are the enemy. No, you are not. You are cold soldiers doing what you were told. And that was all it took. Men started getting out their mess kits and the cups needed to have coffee or tea. One soldier brought out a pack of sugar his mother had given him just 3 weeks ago, before all this mess started. He carefully poured about 20 grams out in a little pouch to give to the girl and her father as a gift. They all got a few sips in their canteen cup. They toasted for peace. They toasted for thanks. And they made the little girl laugh with their funny faces and compliments. It was a rare moment. One that if the soldiers survived, would be told and retold with awe. The brave little girl and her tea and coffee. For a few minutes, the war was forgotten. They waved with truly good wishes for the little girl and her dad. The sergeant spoke once the little girl and her dad had gone out of sight. I hope to God we don't have to shell their building. Around him, all of the men offered up a prayer. Most for forgiveness when the orders came down. And they would. They would shell that building. And cry. Until. Sergeant! 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 The sergeant leaped to his feet. His nap forgotten. Orders must have come down. He was fully alert and awake now. What is it? Are we to move? The corporal laughed. No. Much better than that. The little girl is back. With more little girls and coffee. What? Sure enough, a handful of girls, with just the one dad and several mothers, were standing in the snow holding steaming pots of tea and coffee. Instantly, seeing the smile on the sergeant's face, the ordinary troopers raced to get out their cups. The little girl gave the sergeant a letter. More like a poster. He read it, tears streaming down his face. He nodded. The little girl beamed. The sergeant sent a report to nearby Russian troops. the dad of the little girl sent his own report to the men and women bearing arms on his side of the war. The letter, more of a proclamation than a letter or poster, was written in a little girl's 10-year-old hand. Flowers and hearts in purple and pink, all hand-drawn, decorated the margins. At the top and bottom were cute 10-year-old drawing of tea and coffee pots. This is what the letter said. Dear soldiers. Soldiers in either army. This corner of 7th and Alexander Streets is now a fight-free zone. It will be a coffee and tea corner only. No weapons. You can carry them on their straps but not in your hands. No shooting. Every morning at 7 a.m., we will bring coffee and hot water for tea. We are out of tea. The store got blown up. You have to bring your own tea. We can't stop the war. We are too little. But we know you are cold, because we are. So please, for a few moments, enjoy the coffee or tea. That is how it began. It grew somehow. Within a week, there was little or no fighting in that sector of the city. Both the Russians and Ukrainians worked to make sure that the area was secure and safe. Smugglers, who just a month earlier sold their goods on the black market with total disdain for the laws of any country, were suddenly good citizens. Donating coffee, tea, and even sugar, in small measured amounts, to the long table set up by the little girls every morning at 7 a.m. Soldiers would chat, sometimes cry and hug at the friends, family, or brothers and sisters already lost to the war. Other times they would talk about what they would do when the war was over. One Russian soldier told a Ukrainian soldier, "When this madness is over, I will bring my 3 brothers and help rebuild. We own a small cement factory and are all builders. I hope I live to see that, it would make me happy. I hope you do to my brother." And they shook hands on it. Word of that kind FO story got up the chain of command. It made it to the desk of the president. He issued an order. One that now sat on the desk of the highest-ranking general still alive. The order was to bomb the corner of 7th Street and Alexander Road, with specific orders to take out the little girl and her father too. We must teach them a lesson. The general put on his medals. He made sure they were exactly where they should be. He made sure his boots were parade ground level. His aides were quiet and respectful. They knew he could have just written back to the president. He chose to tell him face to face. They admired his courage. But they wouldn't bet a plate of borscht on his chances of coming back from that meeting, alive. The general took one more look in the mirror. He saluted himself. He turned to the wall where all of his ancestors seemed to be smiling at him. Proud of his courage, his decision, his backbone. He was a real general. A man. A real man. He saluted them all, gathering courage from their looks at him. His car was waiting. His staff was waiting. waiting to hear of his dispatch, or sham trial and exile. Some of them cried. At the secret palace, a red-faced megalomaniac puffed up in anger at the answer his general just gave him. I gave you an order. Now, think carefully, will you carry it out, or not? The palace guards couldn't help it. They stared at the statue-stiff general. So did the entire bunch of sycophants left surrounding the megalomaniac masquerading as a leader. The general's voice had no give in it. No submission. No fear. No. Epilogue. The three brothers shook hands with the Ukrainian soldier from the coffee point. They had brought more than 100 workers and 20 cement trucks to the corner of 7th Street and Alexander Road. The little girl was handing out coffee not 3 meters from where they stood. They all turned and saluted with their coffee cups. She waved back. They all smiled. It wasn't over, it was a new beginning.